Hey game developers, Bilal from Zenfinity.net and welcome to this UI fading tutorial. And in this video, we're just going to go ahead and create a UI fader script that uses a coroutine to go from any arbitrary value exactly to any other arbitrary value exactly with that canvas group's alpha. So what we're going to do is first set up a basic UI here. It's really going to be nothing special, just a couple images here. So I'm going to set up a panel here with some values that I have already reset, and I'll close this navigation tab here. And I'm going to pick this center anchor here, and for our width I'll hit 534, and for our height I'll hit 452. Now of course these don't matter at all, I'm just doing it for this tutorial's example. I'll actually drag the height a little bit down more, and I'm going to just change this background color to black and make its alpha a little bit stronger. Okay. Now what I'm going to do next is add a canvas group component to our panel here. So a canvas group is able to determine if we want this to be interactable, if we want it to block raycasts, and what the alpha is as a master alpha. So that is of course between 0 and 1. So if I set it to 0.5 here, you see it's half of this color's alpha. Okay, now I'm going to create two buttons here for fading in and fading out. Which are going to use, of course, 0 and 1 as values. Of course, any value can be used here. So let's go ahead and create on this canvas a UI button and another UI button. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and drag these in the scene view here. I'll drag our button. Actually, I'm going to hit this 2D tag here. So I'll drag this button down here, and I'll align it to the left. And I'll drag our other button all the way over here, and I'll anchor it to the right. Okay. So let me go ahead and write in the text here. This text is going to be fade out, capitalized to make it fancy. Okay. And then in here, this one will be fade in. Okay, perfect. So now we have these fade in and out buttons here, and we can just go ahead and write our script that will use a canvas group to completely fade or fade out. So let me go ahead and create C# script, call it UI fader or canvas group fader, whichever one you fancy. So let's go ahead and double click this, it'll open in Visual Studio. Okay, and so now I just want to go ahead and create our first function here, which is going to be that IEnumerator or coroutine for fading the canvas group here. So let me go ahead and delete these start functions. Okay, so here I'll write public IEnumerator fade canvas group. Okay, so this is going to obviously take a canvas group CG in here. It'll take a float for the start value and a float for the end value and a float for the lerp time. So how long we want it to take before to get from one value to the other one, basically. Okay. And I'll set this by default to 0.5 F. Okay. So now let's go ahead and have a value for our canvas group. Simply so that we have somewhere to drag it to. You can of course have this in any script and then just pass it here. But for this situation, we're going to go ahead and pass it to a fade in and fade out functions here. So as a placeholder, I'm just going to write our temporary while loop here, which will return waiting for the end of the frame. So this will basically run at the speed of an update function. Okay, so at the end here, I'm just going to add in a print, print done, of course in quotation marks. Okay. All right, and so now I just need to go ahead and write our two functions, and then I'll write in the logic here afterwards. So let's have public void fade in. We'll start the coroutine fade canvas group. We'll pass in the UI element. Our start will be the UI elements alpha, and our end will be, let's say 1, of course, because we want to fade in. And I actually won't change the lerp time value, as I'm going to keep it as 0.5 for now. And I'll demonstrate in the future that we can change it to whatever we want. Okay, so Please keep in mind that whenever we call fade in, we are going to be starting a new coroutine that's doing the same thing. So what you'll want to do in the future is go ahead and stop the coroutine whenever you change or try to fade in again this canvas group. Okay, so let me go ahead and copy this to make our next function, which is going to be fading out. So start coroutine here, and we want to change this to 0. Okay, now let's go ahead and start our lerp function with, I guess, the correct logic here for a linear interpolation, which means that we go from one value to another value over some period of time. We don't technically have any external smoothing. Commonly, people will use time.delta_time in the lerp function, but you typically want to avoid that because it makes it so that it never reaches the end value. And we want to reach the end value, but we're not using any smoothing in this case. If you want to use smoothing, I suggest something like a sine function. But in this case, we're just going to be creating that typical lerp. So we need a value for the time we started lerping and the time since we started, and we have a percentage complete variable as well. So let's begin typing here for time started lerping equals time.time. Okay. And we'll have a float time since started equals time.time minus time started lerping. Okay, so really quick, basically this time since started lerping, or sorry, time started lerping, we just store time.time because at the time, sorry about using time so much, but when we call, or when we access time.time, it is the current time at that time. So, you know, obviously if it's 100 seconds right now and we call time.time, it'll return 100 seconds. So that way we can say that time.time is time minus time started lerping, because that will be basically the difference between the two. So we only want to record these once here, but in our while loop we want to constantly record these because this is where our lerping is going to happen. So we kind of just repeat ourselves here, but remove the float because we don't want to redeclare them. And actually we do not need the time started lerping here. We only want to record this as soon as we call the coroutine, which is going to happen once. Now we want to constantly update the time since started because that's going to let us use our percentage complete value here, which I'll add in as well. So let's have a float percentage complete, which of course will just be time since started divided by lerp time, because that's basically how long we're going to be taking, and this is how long we have taken. Okay, so now let's go ahead and write percentage complete again to store this. So down here, okay, and now we're storing our current percentage, and that's all working fine. So let's go ahead and find what our current value is here. So current value equals mathf.lerp. This is where the lerping comes in, of course. We're using that start, our end, and our percentage complete. So that means that we're going to keep lerping the current value here from the start and to the end. Okay, and now let's change our cg.alpha and set it to our current value, because that's really what we're doing here, is we're changing what our value is by lerping from the start to the end over this percentage, and then we store that value in our alpha so that it kind of lerps that way. Okay, so now we just want to check if percentage complete is greater than or equal to 1, then we want to break, because that means that we finished. So we get out of this while loop, we stop waiting for the end of frame, and then we'll see this print here, which is done. Mind you, I would like to mention that since this is going to run through an end every time, since we hit that exact end, we can put anything here that will happen after we're done fading. For example, you could even pass a callback in these parameters and then have it be called here, because that way you kind of have this coroutine that's running in the background, and then once it finishes, it'll do something. But we won't get any deeper into that. For now, we can go into Unity, I believe, and then set these values for our UI element and see how this fader works. Okay, and yeah, let's go ahead and save this by hitting Control-S, this scene here. We'll just call it main.unity so we don't lose our progress here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and attach our UI fader. I'll go ahead and attach it to our... I'll attach it to the main camera for now, actually. I believe that should work fine. Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and drag this panel as our canvas group. Okay, and now these fade in and fade out buttons need a reference to that UI fader. So let me go ahead and hit plus here, and I'll drag the main camera here, and I'll choose the UI fader, and I'll choose fade in. This is our fade in button. Yep. So now whenever we click this button, it'll call fade in. And now let's go ahead and do the same for our fade out button. Let's go ahead and drag the main camera here. Oops. Main camera, and we'll hit UI fader and fade out. And we'll save that. Okay. So now if we hit play, we can see fade out will go all the way out, and it'll print done. If we fade in, it'll fade all the way in, hit done. Perfect. So over 0.5 seconds, we completely fade in or out, and then we have something run at the end. For example, we could have this canvas group. Where is it? Canvas group. One thing that we might want to do once we're done fading is set interactable to false or blocks raycasts to false, and vice versa if we're fading in. Now that's because that way, once we fade out, we can no longer click on the canvas group. So that's going to be it for this tutorial. And I hope it helped you out, and if it did, make sure to hit that like button and hit subscribe to see the rest of these videos that I'm going to be uploading. We get 2 new tutorials every week. So with all that said, I will actually point you over to our free ebook here in the top right that'll help you create your first game, and it'll tell you all the tools that you need if you're completely new, from art to programming to everything else, like even audio. So make sure to check that out. It's absolutely free. You click that card and I'll send it right to you, and I will see you in the next video.